Talib, my man, I'm sorry this took me so long. It's bloody busy, being unemployed and redundant and doing nothing. But here we go, man. I finally recorded lesson one for you. And the good news is all the other lessons are recorded. So I'll send you a link to all of them and also like notes from all the classes. So you don't have to take notes while these go on. But yeah, man, hope you're doing well. Glad to hear you're kind of like wanting to pick up new skills during quarantine. So here's a little DJ class I've put together. So in the first class, it's we're actually just going to take a step back instead of just diving straight into DJing and talk about sound in general, some basics of sound, a little bit of history, a bit of what is DJing, how did it come about, what it isn't as well. But yeah, you can see the course overview over here. You can see like, what we're going to cover. I think I've sent you that screenshot before. But yeah, a little bit about me and my intro to sound. I don't know if you know that this is my proper formal intro that I give includes you. I say that I discovered electronic music in grade 9 in Cody, Mavala. My roommate at the time, Talib Chitalwala, forced some earphones into my ears and made me listen to Strobe by Deadmau5. And something just clicked. I was like, this is fucking amazing. I got to chase this. Then I was a corporate slave for 5 years, and now I'm back in my true form, trying to chase that. Which is why I'm actually studying Deadmau5's masterclass. I don't know if I told you that. Maybe I did. But anyway, man, let's go ahead and get started. Hope you have fun. So the first lesson is called The Story of Grandmaster Flash, because it's a bit of a tale. And I'll tell you his story in a bit. We're just going to start with some basics. So what is DJing to start with, right? So what it is, it's mixing from one track to another. So it's the art of the transition. And it's also building a narrative or a soundtrack for a mood or for an occasion, whether it's a club night, whether it's just you on SoundCloud feeling something and wanting someone across another part of the world to feel that same thing. You can use music to do that. And that really comes down to song selection, right? That's what I'm talking about there. What it isn't is you're not changing an original track. And I'm just talking about basic DJing here, right? We'll get into all sorts of complex DJing that can happen later, but I'm just talking about most nights you go out to a club, you're seeing a guy on two decks, or him or her, what are they doing? So they're not changing the original track. They can add effects to an existing track, but they can't like fully take out a beat when there is a beat in that track. Or change, put a different vocal in. To that original track. That original track stays the same, and then you can use loops and tricks and use a second track to change it, but you're not changing the bass. You're also not therefore producing original music. Like when they're up there and turning a knob, they didn't create that chord that you're hearing, right? So that's not to diss DJing or to say it's not important. I'm a big fan of DJing. That's why I'm doing I help put together this course to help other like bedroom DJs or whatever get started on their journey. But it's important to know, I think, what it is and what it isn't. So what's actually hard about it then in that case? The actual art of DJing and mixing, my opinion, is pretty easy. Like obviously there's scratch DJs and all that, but that's totally different. I'm just talking about your basic go-to DJing, mixing. That's easy and learnable like any other skill. The tough part is something I think you naturally, out of many people, like you have this already, maybe because of Imran. I don't know how, but you have it. But it's building extensive music knowledge. It's knowing your music. It's knowing what feels like what's energetic. What does this crowd need right now? That's this last point. It's playlisting a journey through a night. Either a preset kind of like mix that you want to go through or responding live to a crowd, like improvisational DJing. And that's something that we'll build to. But yeah, that's a little bit of an overview. So what are the actual core components, like when someone's DJing? So this will all make sense in the next section when I put some photos next to them. But basically, there are different kinds of setups that you're going to see, right? You're probably wondering, how is virtual DJ or Traktor different to the Pioneer CDJs that you've seen Axwell use in a video, to vinyl turntables? Well, they are all actually made of the same bones. They just have different interfaces. So they all will have a file browser. So what is that? It's a library where you go to select a track. They'll all have track players, which are called decks. So that that will do anything to do with the track. As you can see here, it can load a track, it can start a track, it can pause the track, it can go back to the first part of the track. You can change the speed of the track using, the thing on the right. It's called a pitch shifter or a tempo fader. And it might also, in the more fancier ones, might have some bonus features like hot cues where you can jump to different parts of a track that you've selected before, or you can loop a part of a track, right? As you can see, everything over here ends with the word the track. You get the point. Like, track players do everything to do with playing or affecting the track. Then you'll also have a mixer. So what a mixer does is it takes the signal that's coming out of the track player, and it can then do anything to do that with affecting the signal. So for example, make it louder. It has a volume control. It'll have an equalizer. We'll dive into that just later today, but that's the low, mid, high knob that you see. You probably generally know what it is, but I'll show you exactly what it is in a sec. And it might have a crossfader. So that's the slider in the middle that goes from left to right, and it can control how much ratio of signal or volume you want from deck A and then you want from deck B. Okay. It'll also have an effects rack, most setups. So that's just a part that will take the audio coming out of the mixer generally before it goes out to the crowd, and you can add character, you can add reverbs, delays, echoes. Traktor has some amazing effects, which we'll get to in a sec. Cool. So those are your core components. I'm actually going to keep them open while I show you the software versus hardware, because you're probably wondering, what's the difference between Traktor and CDJs, etc. So we'll just clear some terminology, and I'll also make my position on my bias, which is going to come out very soon, very clear. So there is hardware, right? So for example, there's vinyl. So here's actually an image, and this man is Grandmaster Flash, sometimes referred to as the first DJ as we know it in the world. So I'm actually going to pause here, and feel free to pause the video, but I want to ask you to look at this photo closely and match these core components to the photo. So where's the file browser? Where are the track players? Where's the mixer, and where's the effects rack? So pause. Cool. If you weren't able to spot it or you're having some difficulty, no problem. It's not the best photo. It's the best one I could find. So the most obvious ones that stick out are, like, obviously his hands are on this vinyl that's playing the track. So that's the track deck, right? The vinyl was the old version of the deck, the original deck. So there's one over here and there's one over here. So that's the giveaway of A and B. There's two track players, tick. A mixer, this giant thing in the middle, is probably taking the signals out, as you can see with the cables at the back, feeding the signals in, and he's able to control the levels, etc. An effects track, look, probably there in the mixer. Don't know old mixers. What about the file browser? You can see these vinyl lying around, like this vinyl thing over here on the left, and he probably has a vinyl crate or a vinyl bag underneath his feet as well. That was the old school file browser. That's how you carried your tracks around. Cool. So what's the actual story of Grandmaster Flash? Why have I made him like the main character in this class, I guess? It's because I really love his story. So back in the day, they had these dance halls, and DJs weren't really the epicenter of the dance halls. It wasn't like today where the DJ is up on a stage and everyone's like raving like they're God. The DJ was more someone in the back who's doing just some geeky stuff in the back end to make sure the music keeps going. But they would play a track, then they would stop it, and then they play the next track, or they'd have an awkward fade out, fade in, right? So Grandmaster Flash comes in and he finds this one track. I think it was Billie Jean by, no, it was way before Billie Jean, but whatever. He finds this one track that has a break in the middle, and that break is basically a part where all the drums come in, and it's just like this pumping part. Like today, we'd probably call it the drop, but it only went for like 16 bars, so some amount of time, and then it would go to something else. But when that break came in, the crowd fucking lost their shit. They just went wild. They loved it. So Grandmaster Flash really wanted to extend that section. Now today is really easy to do, and you learn how to do that. It's as easy as clicking a button. But back then it wasn't. So here's what he did. He made two copies of the same vinyl. He played the song on the first deck A. And then on deck B, he found on his headphones, without the audience hearing, he found the first beat of that break. So then when the last beat of the break ended over here, he immediately pressed play and moved the crossfader over to deck B, and it's played this illusion that it's looped. It started again. And while that happened, he would on deck A again find the first beat of the 16 bars that made everyone go crazy. And so then when it ended here, he would switch back and hit play right as the beat like logically looped back onto it. So he would keep this going for like 4 or 5 times, and suddenly the crowd was like, the audio is being manipulated. Someone's doing something to it. Someone's actually shaping the journey now, rather than just like being a jukebox. So suddenly the DJ became a bit of a hero or a character in the dance hall, rather than just someone in the back. And that's probably why we're here today. Like if he didn't do what he did that day, I mean, someone probably would years later, but yeah, he kind of like helped pioneer this whole movement and art form, which is pretty cool. So what about pioneer CDJs? You've seen these, I'm sure. You probably wonder what they do. I'm going to pause again for a second. I'll ask you to pause the video and find these 4 core components on these pioneer CDJs. Pause. Cool. How did you go? The first most obvious thing that comes up is like these massive jog wheels. So that is, again, the decks. So track player 1, track player 2, so deck A, deck B. You'll usually find this in pairs, although there can be 3 or 4 as well, like 3 or 4 sources of sound. A mixer, this big ass thing in the middle, it's taking the inputs. You can see low, mid, high. That's what those knobs are. And the faders are like how loud you want it. This crossfader, this line over here is like left to right. Effects rack, I mean, you probably don't know where it is, but it's just this strip over here. So the audio goes out of the mixer into that strip and then out into the master where the crowd can hear it. File browser, they just use the screen. So back in the vinyl days, you had to have a crate or vinyl. In the CDJ world, you just plug in a USB or an SD card into the slot over here. So DJs just show up to a club with an SD card or a USB, and then yeah, they can select that track using that file browser, that screen over there, basically. Cool. So let's move on to software. So we remember Virtual DJ from our canteen days, right? So let's have a look. Now that you've seen the hardware, what are the core components over here? I'm going to pause again for a sec. Pause. Okay, unpause. So hopefully you got it, but you get the point. Deck A, deck B, mixer in the middle, file browser down here. Effects rack is on the left and on the right. Okay. Now let's look at Traktor, which is our preferred weapon of choice for this course. And I'll explain why in a sec. I'm going to pause and you got to find the core components. Pause. Okay, hopefully you've got the hang of it by now. Deck A on the left, deck B on the right, mixer in the middle with the EQ and crossfader. Effects on this one actually on the top left, and can also be on the top right. You can have 2 effects racks. And file browser down here, you can make that bigger and you can choose your tracks. So the reason I wanted to point that out is to show you that although the hardware looks so much bigger and bulkier, probably sexier, it's way more expensive, they are actually all serving the same function. If you break it down to like, what does it actually do? And in terms of quality, the audio quality, none is better or worse because one is bigger and one is a software. It's all digital. They sound exactly the same. But here we get to my controversial opinion and my bias, which I'm not afraid to pepper throughout the course because it's my course and I'm doing it for fun. So why not share what I believe in, right? So I actually believe software can do way more than hardware, right? And there's a few reasons. There's a few just facts. So number one, you can have more than 4 hot cues. A lot of the expensive Pioneer CDJs are restricted to 4 hot cues. In Traktor, you can have 8 hot cues. Hot cues where you can, store a certain part of a track and jump exactly to it. You can seamlessly move through the track in Traktor. So I'll show you that in like later classes. But what I mean is you can fast forward in a track, but it sounds like you didn't even skip a beat. It's fucking fantastic. You can't do that in Pioneer. And it's just something that's pretty native to Traktor from what I found so far and is incredible. Quantized effects. So what I mean by that is there's a BPM in every track, a beat grid. And if you have a delay in Traktor, rather than just delaying all over the place, it'll delay like tick, 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 tick in the actual grid or in sync with the BPM that's been set. And it's all the time. You just can't mess that up. But at the end of the day, what really matters is like beat matching or syncing, which is what you need to do in the old systems to like match the BPM of the track with your ear and stuff. I mean, nowadays they've advanced and there's like sync buttons in Pioneers as well. But software has always been based around, look, let the DJ just use sync because it can be automated by a computer. So why not? And then you can use that time to have time back to do more creative things, whether it's effects or mashups or 4-deck mixing or thinking of the next track that you want to play. All sorts of creative stuff that you can do that software allows you to do, where hardware kind of is a bit limited. So yeah, so that's a little bit of I guess this background. Something I thought I'd also clarify is some terminology. So what is a controller? Like I've shown you hardware, so like decks and Pioneer CDJs, etc. But what are controllers? It's slightly different. So like while there are softwares like Traktor, Virtual DJ, Serato is another one. These companies, they make controllers, which are hardware, like mixers that actually emulate the software. So if I ever say controller rather than Pioneer CDJs, this is what I'm referring to. So for example, this is the Traktor S4 MK3. It's also my dream mixer. I mean, my dream controller. It just is so fucking great and looks amazing. And my birthday is on November 24th. So Talib, if you ever want to buy me a gift, that's my birthday. You can save up now. It's about $1,000. But yeah, so that's a little bit about, what is a controller? What is a mixer? So now let's talk about some more music stuff. We're gonna listen to tunes. It's not just my voice the whole time, I promise. So we'll go through song structure and then equalization and transitions, and that's enough for today's class, right? So in terms of song structure, something you need to know about music. Have you ever heard the phrase 4/4? It's referring to a time signature. It basically means that there are 4 beats in a bar before that bar repeats, and you have to start counting from 4 again. I'll show you what that means in a second, but you just need to understand that basically 99% of the music you listen to is in this time signature, and dance music like 100% all of the time. Okay, I mean jazz and some really alternative rock can go off of this, but maybe I don't think that's what you're trying to mix right now. If you're trying to just mix dance music and things like that, 4/4 is the time signature that you're in. And what that means is because there's 4 beats in a bar, there are some important numbers in DJing. That's right, DJing can be a little bit mathematical and geeky. So those important numbers are 4, 8, 16, and 32. Okay? I know you might feel like, why did you skip 12 if it's like 8 plus 4 is 12? It's just the way it is. 4, 8, 16, 32 are the really important numbers. Maybe it's because 4 times 4 is 16. And 16, which is already has a lot of 4 in it, times 2 is 32. And I'll show you why those numbers are important in just a second. So I've loaded up 2 tracks here for you. This is Ableton. You don't need to learn Ableton. This is just, I think, a visual way of showing you the point that I'm trying to make. Although if you finish the DJ class, we are discussing maybe doing a basics Ableton class. So that's for months down the road. So here's a track. You've probably heard it. I'm joking. You showed me this track. Intro by the XX and Van Dorn's remix. So what you're seeing over here is actually beats and bars on top of it. So if you count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If my voice and the beat lags, it's just because of Zoom, but you get the idea, right? So there's 4 beats in a bar before you see this grid, that bar loops again. And so let's apply that theory I was telling you earlier, that important things or changes happen every 4, 8, 16 or 32 bars. One of those examples is that a typical intro of a dance music track goes for 32 bars. So let's test that. Let's actually first hear what happens at the end of the 16th bar. There's something dramatic happen. So I'm just going to go to bar 16 and let's hear the end of bar 16 and see if a change happens. Cool. So that little drum was added exactly at the end of the 16th bar. Was that a coincidence? I don't know. Let's go to the end of the 32nd bar. So exactly at the end of the 30-second bar, you could say the song kind of started, aka the intro ended. So intros typically go for 32 bars. What about outros? So let's take 171 as the start of the outro. And it ends at 187. So 187 minus 171, 16. So again, you know, as I said, 4, 8, 16, 32. And you might think, okay, well, that's just one song, you know, that's a coincidence. Let's take a completely different random song. George and Pasta, Lorila remix. So let's hear it. Cool, it's doing its thing. Let's just jump to the end of the 16th bar. Okay, so the melody came in exactly at the end of the 16th bar. Let's go to the end of the 32nd bar. Cool. So pretty dramatic change happened there as well. So here's one thing that I like to clarify at this point. You might hear in a lot of these, like, you know, like electronic music, and especially wherever it says extended mix or original mix, the first minute or so is just doof daff, and there's some Indian uncle at the back saying, turn this crap off. There's nothing happening. It's actually made boring on purpose, where it's mainly percussive. It's just like a kick and a snare drum, because that's actually used for the DJs to mix. So you line up the outro of a track with another intro, and it's like it's just made for each other. Generally tracks usually start at the 1 minute mark, which happens to be 30 at the end of 32 bars at 128 BPM is exactly 1 minute. It's just a coincidence, but that's how it is, right? So yeah, that's a little bit about song structure. Everything happens in patterns of 16 or 32. So what your job as a DJ then to do is really find blocks that go with each other. That's one way to break down the transition. Cool. I'll show you how to transition and stuff in a second. We're going to first talk about another concept called equalization, or EQ. So you've probably seen the low, mid, high on a mixer. This actually talks about why, like, what does that do? And I'm going to show you, like, visualize a spectrum so you can actually see what frequencies are. So here is a spectrum, or an EQ, right? So I'm going to play a track, and you're going to see the response here. I don't know if this was already open. You might have noticed. Okay, cool. So I'm playing the Sander Van Dorn track, and this is what it looks like. Pretty cool, huh? As you can see, there's like this mountain in the bottom over here, on the left, and then it kind of dies down. What you're seeing, I'm just going to pause and explain, is on the y-axis, so the one, vertical, that's volume, and on the x-axis is frequency. So it starts with low frequencies on the left, which is why the big kick drum over there, and then it goes to high frequencies on the right. So what are low frequencies? What are high frequencies? I'm going to sound really stupid for a sec, but low frequencies are sounds that are low in pitch. So it's probably the lowest sound I can make. And then the highest frequencies, so, that range in between 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz is the range of human hearing. And if you're ever wondering, like, how come it says 100 here, then 1,000, then 10,000, like this escalates so quickly? It's because it's actually a logarithmic scale. And so what an equalizer does is it shows you the volume of each frequency range. That's what this is. So let's have a play around. What if I was to, filter out low frequencies? How would the track sound? Right? You can hear the kick drum went. If I was to put it back in. Kick drums are usually the loudest part of the track in electronic music. What about the other way? What does it sound like if I take away the high frequencies? Sounds like you're outside a nightclub, right? And then when the nightclub door opens, cool. So yeah, that's basically what frequencies are. And then what equalizing is taking decisions where you turn up or down the volume of a specific frequency range, to make, creative, like basically to allow two songs to merge together better. And I'll show you that in a sec. But instead of having this equalizer, which is a little bit, like it's cool, but it's a little bit finicky to use in the middle of a DJ performance. They've broken up this into 3 sections: low over here, mid over here, and high over here. So this EQ on the left will show you what an equalizer does. If I was to take out the low, you see how the low frequencies went? And then take out the mid. That's like the heart, the body of the track, really. And then high, sounds muffled, right? Let me show you a part where there's more melody and stuff. Yeah. So melodies usually look like this. Take out the low, sounds flat, mid, it's lost its soul, high, sounds like it's muffled or it's behind something, right? So yeah, that's the basics of an equalizer, and you'll find this in your software in Traktor, in every mixer. And we're going to dive more into what to actually do with it later. But I thought it's important that you like visualize those frequencies so you just see what they are. Why do we actually need to EQ? There's 2 reasons I'll call out. One of them is a technical reason. So it's because digital meters, all digital sounds, they have a hard stop at 0 decibels. So what I'm talking about is actually, yeah, let me pull out a digital meter and show you, right? So if you see this bar over here, you know, it's over here as well, I guess. If I turn it up, if I go past 0, it'll actually go red. I don't want to do it because I just got brand new speakers and I don't want to blow them, but it'll actually distort. You're not meant to go past 0. Anything going above that red line is bad. And the words for it, I might refer to this because this is just the term for it, is redlining, clipping, distortion. What we're talking about is going above that red line. So as you saw, the kick drum is the loudest part of a track. Now imagine if you have 2 kick drums playing at the same time. Frequencies sum up, and then those frequencies are going to add up and you're going to distort. So that's one of the reasons why we have EQ, so that you can mix 2 tracks, but you can take out a section of one track and replace it with a section of another. There's also a creative reason, which is called fighting frequencies. So I think the best example of this would be like the 3 Chittalwala brothers are standing all around their mom and saying, I want biryani, 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 biryani really loudly. Your mom's going to get bloody pissed off because it's 3 guys with the same voice in her head, okay? But what if it was just one of you? It wouldn't be as bad. Or one of you was like doing it, but their hand was over their mouth and so it's muffled. It wouldn't be as bad. So yeah, frequencies sum together. And sometimes it can sound good and you want to complement those frequencies summing together, but sometimes they can sound bad. An unwritten rule of DJing, I think I just told you this, is you don't want to have 2 kick drums or 2 bass lines playing at the same time. You can have both the lows up, but if both the tracks are in a section where the bass line and the kick is pumping, you definitely want to like fix that, because that's going to distort and it's just going to sound messy. Okay. Cool. So now that you know a bit about song structure and a bit about equalization, let's just put that together and show you an example transition. And then yeah, we can wrap up. So the first thing I'd say in a transition is you want to make sure that your tracks are beat matched or synced. Now with Traktor and software, you don't have to worry about this. It's as easy as hitting a button, sync, but we are going to dive into it in this lesson. Like, how does sync work? Why, how do people without sync do it? I think it's important to know. But yeah, you basically want to make sure that both those tracks are playing at the same speed. So the speed of a track is called its beats per minute. It's BPM. And you want to make sure that they start at the same phrase. What do I mean by phrase? As I said earlier, tracks go in a cycle of 1, 2, 3, 4. So you want to make sure both tracks are on their 1, rather than one track being at their 3 and then you're starting at the 1. That's not right. And again, we'll dive into all of that in the beat matching class. Okay. So I'm going to show you the example outro, intro, transition. So this is where you line up those 32 bars that the producer has very kindly given you of audio fading out. And then you grab 32 bars of audio fading in, sync them up, and you just line them up together. That's all. So let's hear what it sounds like. So I'm going to find the last 32 bars. I don't think those last 32. Hang on. 187 minus 32, 155. So I'm just going to put it there. 150. Cool. doing its thing. And I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm not even touching it, right? It's just running itself. All I've done is I've lined up the last 32 tracks. The last 32 beats, track A, the first 32 of track B. That guitar is the second track. It seems like it came in at just the perfect moment, but because all I've done is I've lined up the first 16 at the same time. Cool. So look, not the best transition in the world, but it wasn't bad. You can say it worked. And all I did was line them up. I haven't touched EQ. I haven't done any of that, right? So that's one example of a transition, and it's something that we're going to go over again and again in the coming classes with different combinations of tracks. But that's honestly 80% of transitions in the DJ world. Like, it's a bit sad, but it doesn't mean that that's the only one you have to do. There's many other different options. There's a loop transition where you can find a nice part of track A, keep it looping, and then introduce track B, and then fade in little parts of track B using equalizer, and fade out little parts of track A using equalizer as well. There's hip hop mixing or jump mixing, so a bit more like what Grandmaster Flash did, which is like hip hop's usually more 8 and 16 bars, whereas electronic music happens at 16 and 32 bars, the changes, I mean. So in hip hop, you don't have as much time. So you line up, track A is ending, you line up track B, and then at the right time, you just switch. You just take your crossfader and you just flick it across. So the transitions happen like instantly. Whereas with electronic music, you can spend a lot of time in that transition phase, sometimes up to like a whole minute or 2 minutes. Also with psytrance, you do this jump mixing kind of style. And you're not limited to just those transitions. There's also so many different ways you can get creative. For example, you can break the rules. Like, as I said, line up 32, the first 32 with the last 32, but what if you do it a bit differently? Like, let's just have a play. What if I just bring this back 16? So what if all I've done is I've deleted that first part and I'm going to bring this in. So I don't know how it's going to sound. Let's just see what it sounds like. You can already hear that guitar. I'm going to use a bit of EQ. Start taking out the lows of the first track. Kind of make room for the second track because I can see a big bass drop is coming. Add a bit of reverb. Maybe a bit more, maybe take out the mids too. Ooh, that was a bit too much. Track A is still there. It's just a reduced version of itself because I've EQ'd out a lot of it. Cool. So I would say, both transitions are fine, but I find that, with quicker transitions where you're waiting less for the first track to fade out, they make the set feel more energetic and lively. And slower transitions, like the first one I did, they make the set feel more like chilled out and laid back. There's no right or wrong. It just depends what vibe you're going for. You can kind of choose what transitions you want. But that's an important thing, breaking the rules. Like in this class, you're going to understand the rules and then you completely have reign to break them. But at least you understand what they are and like what you're breaking. Right? There's other creative things you can do. You can grab acapellas, so that's vocal only versions of the track, and find a different beat and mash up things live. You can cue jump, which is going from one part of the song right to the end, right to the beginning again. There's a transition I do later in the class, in one of the later classes that does that, and you can see that in action. 4 decks. If you grow out of 2 decks, then you can have 4 decks and do 4 things at the same time. Definitely not for now, something to grow towards. Harmonic mixing, which is like every track is in a certain key. How do you match tracks by key? There's this image that I'll show you that makes a lot of sense in that class, harmonic mixing. But anyway, those are a few things that you learn in the class. For now, there's a bit of homework. So bro, all you got to do is download 10 tracks you love. Super easy for you, but can be hard to filter them down to 10. There's a website that Prayansh and I found that you might find helpful. And then download the Traktor Pro 3 demo. And then it looks like this. import your tracks into Traktor. So import your, the 10 tracks. All you have to do then is like select them, right click and click analyze and okay. That's all. And then Traktor will kind of like analyze them, do what it needs to do. Make sure you click sync on both the tracks and then try to play them and understand their song structure. So try and see if you can count the 1, 2, 3, 4 in different songs. Like no matter what it is, you should be able to pick it up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go to something else. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It should just become second nature for you. So find different tracks, count 1, 2, 3, 4. Try counting it until you feel a change that happens and that you landed it on the 1. That means you've got it right? See if you can count up to 32 bars and notice that like big changes happen at the end of 16 and 32 bars. And then at the end of the day, man, for now, just have fun, play around with different tracks, try and line up outros with intros, and try and see if you can nail the outro intro transition. But yeah, that's it for now. I'll send you all of these notes in a doc as well, and just download Traktor and have fun. And thanks for getting me onto all of this by putting strobe into my ears a few years ago, bro. Take care, man.